Clips and images used in my videos are owned entirely by the copyright holders. I do not own anything shown in this video and am simply using the footage for commentary and criticism under fair use. Please support the copyright holders like I do by legally purchasing and watching this movie in its entirety via whichever rental outlet you prefer. Thank you. What's up, guys? Welcome to the first episode of How Good Is It? A show where we watch all the worst movies in the world to figure out how good they are. Today we're talking about the EMOJI Movie. This movie got clowned the fuck on when it first came out last year. It had like a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes for a long time, and now it's like slowly wiggled its way up to like 7% or something like that. I want to say the audience score is like close to 50. I did see the EMOJI Movie in theaters last year. I unfortunately paid real money to see it. I paid real money to see it at like 10:30 a.m. on a Sunday. So I had a bad time, but watching it again, I actually do kind of want to say it's not really that bad as I remember. It's a really jarring view your first time. I think if I was doing this video then it'd be a little different, but watching it for the second time, I think it's sort of like, once you've kind of settled into all the things that they're doing, it's really not that bad of a movie. So let's get into it. The plot of the movie is basically, there's this emoji, and he's the meh emoji, and in Textopolis, where the emoji lives inside of a smartphone, everybody is one emoji, and everyone is that emoji really well, and no one is like other emojis. Like no one, it's like this weird like dystopia sort of thing almost. It's not like a dystopia, it's like a Lego movie dystopia where like everyone's going around going, everything is awesome, but like everyone's just kind of a dick, and I don't know, like he feels he's outcasted because he's not really that way. He has multiple emojis, or emotions I guess is the real term, because they're, you know, beings. But a lot of this movie takes place inside the smartphone, but outside the smartphone there's this other plot where Alex is deliberating very, very hard on what emoji to send his crush to tell her that he likes her. And he picks the meh emoji to send to Addie for whatever reason, but he like panics and he ends up making like a shit ton of emojis, and I think he ends up on like this sneezing emoji, like it's some weird emoji that doesn't exist where he's like sneezing and like telling her not to look. And she's like, oh, and he's like, oh no, I ruined my fucking chances. I don't know. I'm like twice the age of the people in this movie, so I don't actually know if this is what the world is like, but I'm pretty sure it's not what that is like. And so because he you know, bombs and he sends Alex into a panic, where throughout this movie, the man emoji and the high five emoji are going on escapades, and they keep ruining his like phone. And so Alex makes an appointment to send it in to erase the phone, and that's jumping pretty far, but it's like an adventure movie where they're going app to app to app to app. The meh emoji runs away with the high five emoji because the high five emoji isn't popular anymore, and he wants to take the meh emoji to this hacker to both make meh one emoji and to also like somehow hack into the high fives, the phone's mainframe, to make high five popular again. And it's like, I don't know, this movie really hangs on by a string. But kind of like the things that keep this movie from like generating with me, because there are like some good parts, you know, I think a lot of the jokes are fine. I actually think this movie does have a good central moral underneath it, which is important for any kids movie, where a lot of this movie he feels like disregarded for having more than one emoji, and there's a lot of like, there are two genders sentiments in this, of like, oh, but you're this, so you have to be this, and being anything other than what is standing in front of me is wrong, and like you're an abomination, you're a, what's the word, a malfunction, I think they use the word that they use in this. And at least personally with me, I found a lot of like gender sexuality like undertones in this, and this sort of idea of like, you know, man is having a lot of emotions and he's experiencing a lot of different things that nobody around him is, and instead of seeing himself as like being who he is, he tries to change himself to fit more into those around him, and by the end, you know, his family and the people around him are sort of like, hey, you know, like you have all these things and you know, that's who you are and that's okay. And I think that that's good. I think I would not like this movie a lot more if it didn't have something to say, but I guess now that I actually say that, it is really skin deep, I guess. So the hacker in the movie is a princess, formerly, and she like leaves the app to become a hacker. And she is like okay, but she's kind of one-dimensional. She kind of has that like really basic, like, you know that thing where movies, they want to create a role model, so they give them one line that's like supposed to like fix everything. And that one line is basically just like, meh says something and she's like, why do men always think that just because they show up, then they're, you know, saving the day or whatever? But that's like the only bit of like feminist theory that we get from her, or any bit of like individual awareness or like drive or whatever that we get from her. The rest of her is just sort of like falling in love with the meh emoji, coming back to being like a princess and kind of accepting who she is, which is fine. That's not really the part I'm griping about, but it's just like, it's like the Sony executives walked into the writer's office and they were like, hey, we need to make her a role model. Will you give her a line or two? And they're like, oh yeah, sure. So they just shoehorn in this like thing where she's like, why do men always be like that? And they're like, okay, we got it guys, there's a role model. You know, and the high five emoji is so fucking annoying through this whole thing. Like all he gives a shit about is like popularity and stuff like that, like literally throughout the entire movie. Like, here's a scene.
Everybody's talking about themselves. How does he know so many people? None of these people know him, but they like him. And that's what matters in this life, popularity.
I think I'd rather just have a real friend.
A real friend? How's that gonna get you anywhere?
Like, I understand that maybe he's like a precautionary tale. Like, maybe I think maybe you're supposed to watch him and be like, okay, like that's a shitty friend. But like throughout the entire movie, he never changes. He never learns anything. He never has a moment of self-reflection. He never stops to turn around and be like, wow, I've been wanting to be popular this whole time, but you know, I have friends and like I'm enough. It's such like a visceral contrast between the meh emoji and the high five emoji, where the meh emoji is really self-aware, and by the end of it, he's sort of like looked inside of himself and the people around him, and he's like, hey, I have friends. This is good, you know? I am enough. My father and my mother, they accept me. And then the high five emoji the whole time is just like, oi, I gotta be more popular. You know, like, oh, who cares about having friends? You just need fans. There never is once a confrontation. So it's like these two completely different things where you're supposed to see the meh emoji and be like, okay, it's good to accept yourself for who you are. And then you see the high five emoji who never once has a moment of introspection and never once like reflects on like maybe how he's being a dick to his friends. It's just like, I don't know. It's like, pick a fucking side. You know? There's this scene where they're like passing through Spotify to get to the other side, and they're writing this like wave of music, and it's a pretty nice scene. And there's another scene that takes place in Instagram where Meh's parents, they like go their separate ways and they come back together inside this picture that Alex took of France, and they sort of like reconnect, and you find out that Meh's father is also sort of a malfunction where he has multiple emojis. And you know, like there's moments of like legitimate legitimate emotion happening, and like there's actually something real that's occurring, which I like, and that's fine. But like that's kind of what solidifies the last of what's good. A lot of this movie is probably fine if you're like below 10 and you're watching it strictly as face value with like no context to like the rest of the world and the way the world is and stuff like that. But like that's not really enough for me to like say that this movie is above criticism, you know, because I'm sure like that's sort of a thing that like people think is like, oh, well, this movie wasn't really made for you. And like, yeah, that's fine. This movie absolutely wasn't made for a 25-year-old guy. The idea that like children's movies and animated movies nowadays aren't specifically made to transcend age is kind of fucking bullshit. You see how well like SpongeBob still like relates to our generation, and how like Adventure Time was such a big hit and stuff like that. Like the things that stand the test of time are going to be kids content that transcends age. And this just doesn't do that. Like, okay, if you want to say that the Emoji Movie is a movie equivalent to the fucking VeggieTales or like Paw Patrol, the worst part about this movie is that there are times where this movie is so far up its own ass in self-importance that you're just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, the movie literally, here, let me show you this scene.
As the pace of life gets faster and faster,
Phones down in 5.
and attention spans get shorter and shorter, and you're probably not even listening to me right now. Who has the time to type out actual words? And that's where we come in. The most important invention in the history of communication. Emojis.
The most important invention in the history of communication, emojis. And it's just like, fuck off. Oh my God, that's so just ridiculous. And I'm not gonna talk about, like, I can't pinpoint every single scene, because to be fair, like, it's this whole movie is not like this. It just comes in waves. Like, the very beginning and the very end are like the two parts that are just like the fucking worst, because there's that part in the very beginning, and then all this movie leads up to is at the very end when Alex takes his phone in to be erased. In the process of it being erased, Meh scans himself, making a bunch of different faces, and it like pops up on Alex's phone, so he has like, he's showing a bunch of different emotions, and Alex sends it to his crush, and his crush is like impressed by it. So let's watch that real quick too.
Hey, I got your text. That's one super cool emoji.
I know, right?
A lot of feelings in one. I get it. I like that you're one of those guys who can actually express his feelings.
That's pretty much it. It's just like, no one thinks that. That's okay, that's what I'm trying to say. There are a lot of things in this movie that, like, even the youngest of the young and the most impressionable of the kids and the teens are still, they're gonna hear that and be like, it's not that deep. Oh, like, the other thing is, like, a lot of this movie feels like corporate advertising. Like, they fall into Candy Crush, and then the Candy Crush screen literally comes up and it goes, Candy Crush, and they talk about Dropbox a lot, which is like the most random thing. What fucking, what 13-year-old has Dropbox on their phone? Who the fuck? No one. Who the fuck uses, like, I use Dropbox for like actual things on my computer. Who the, like, what? Show me an 8th grader who has Dropbox on their phone as like a means of like sharing things. Like, no, dude, come on. Like, so it's clear that that was kind of like thrown in there because, like, oh, you know, whatever stuff. But it's just dripping with corporate advertising, because like they keep reiterating like, oh, we got to go to Dropbox because they have a foolproof firewall right there that keeps all the viruses out, so you can send files and whatever you want without worrying about it. It's like, it's such a fucking commercial. You can kind of tell who slipped them some money, or at least who Sony has like some sort of interest in, because some apps definitely get like a really good treatment and other apps get clowned, and it's kind of like you can tell the difference. So I'm gonna seal it off right there. So how good is it? It's not a 7% movie. That's for sure. It's not. This movie actually is a lot better than 7%. You know, honestly, if it took a little more like a more obvious like gag route, or like a more, it kind of didn't take itself so seriously. It is really jarring at first when you kind of watch it and you're sort of like, are they fucking serious like with this shit? But like the plot they made isn't really that bad. Like the concept of like a world inside of your phone where like the emojis all live in a place and going app to app, like that's basically what the new Wreck-It Ralph is, isn't it? And like that movie's probably gonna get really good reviews, and like, I'm not saying there's any sort of like favoritism happening here. If this movie had a little more self-awareness where it counted, I really don't think this movie would be 7%. I think this movie already before that deserves like 35, 40. But if it did that, I'd say that, if not like maybe a tiny bit more. So yeah, there you have it. 35 to 40 for the Emoji Movie. Thank you for watching this video. You can follow the links included in the bio to my stuff if you don't already know me. You can follow my Twitter, follow me on letterboxd. Feel free to subscribe and like this video if you liked it. And otherwise, see you soon. See you next week. Bye.